What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special. And as most people continue to get absolutely clobbered at the supermarket and at the gas pump and on their utility bills, the comedians over at CNN want to assure you and me that inflation is actually good for us and bad for rich people. Thank you for joining me. I'm Jack Gamble, and I'm Nobody Special. And lately, it seems like every day there is just another example of the mainstream press channeling Marie Antoinette and having another let 'em eat cake moment. And today it was brought to you by none other than the Communist News Network, the good folks over at CNN, who want to assure us that inflation is good for us and bad for the rich people. No, I didn't find this in the entertainment or the comedy section. This was an actual serious headline. I S you not. Now, before we get into this, I have to ask you, could you please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell. It really helps me out, helps me to keep this channel growing, and I'd be forever in your debt. And now it is time to shrink my big fat melon of a head and get into this most ridiculous of headlines. Why inflation can actually be good for everyday Americans and bad for rich people. And I will admit, I immediately wanted to just throw my monitor across the room when I just saw this headline, how condescending and totally factually incorrect this headline is. So I want to get into this article by Allison Morrow to see if, okay, maybe there might be some truth in this article, some legitimate financial case for how inflation could be helping everyday Americans and hurting the rich. Well, let's see. Let's get into this article. No one likes paying more for stuff. That's why inflation, especially the sharp price increases we've seen in recent months, feels like a dirty word. But on the whole, inflation can actually be a good thing for many working class Americans, especially those with fixed rate debt like a 30-year mortgage. Okay, so we're one paragraph into this article, and actually this seems legitimate here, all right? Inflation does help people who are deep in debt as long as that debt is below the rate of inflation. Now, right now, the official statistics for inflation are about 6.2%, and the average 30-year fixed mortgage is somewhere around 3%. So this is correct. When it comes to mortgage debt, inflation is working to the advantage of the average borrower because the purchasing power of the money owed is declining faster than the interest is accruing, which means over time, the borrower is coming out. So we're not too far into the article here, and CNN has made a good point. This is true. Now, reading on, that's because wages are going up, which not only empowers workers, but also gives them more money to pay down debt. Okay, so now I gave them a compliment one sentence ago, and then they had to go totally ruin it with this asinine statement, okay? No, wages are not going up. At least they're not going up enough. Wages are going up slower, much slower than inflation right now. So this phrase that because wages are going up, it empowers workers, total baloney, BS, period, hard stop. Okay? Right now, the average American's wages are going down in relative purchasing power because unless you got a 6.25% raise last year, your wage growth has not kept up with inflation, which means your life is getting harder. And that is the case for just about anyone who earns a wage in this country, with the exception of the super wealthy who have most of their income comes from capital gains on assets that they own. In other words, the rich are the only ones whose wages are going up faster than inflation right now, which of course flies in the face of the entire premise of this article. More on that later. Now, the other thing I have to say here, it gives them more money to pay down debt. Okay, not true. And also not a good idea. Now, this is where I have to see YMIA and say this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Do your own research, your own DD, arrive at a decision right for you based on your unique situation. Now, first of all, we just established that having debt, at least low interest debt, like a 30-year mortgage, is good in an inflationary environment. So why would we want to pay down that debt? Why would we want to pay down a debt that we just established is working in our favor? That is a very bad use of those funds. All right, those funds, if you have money to pay down low interest debt, you're better off buying assets which are going to generate a return that is well in excess of the interest you're paying on that mortgage. So CNN follows up one good statement about 30-year mortgages being an advantage in an inflationary environment, but then totally ruins it by suggesting you pay it off early. That's terrible advice. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. This isn't financial advice. But my goodness, paying down a mortgage today, paying down your mortgage ahead of time is one of the worst decisions you can make, in my opinion. And the other thing that it says that inflation with wages going up gives workers more money, that is not true, because we just established earlier that wages are not going up on pace with inflation. So no, workers don't have more money, because any increase in their wages is just being immediately eaten up by an increased cost for food, for fuel, for utility bills, and everything else that's going up. So CNN, you had one good sentence in this article, one good sentence, and you had to ruin it in the following sentence. So moving on. Plus, in the case of your mortgage, your monthly payment will be the same, but your house will increase in value. Okay, so they have slightly redeemed themselves again. This paragraph, they are 2 for 3. 2 good sentences out of 3, because your house has gone up in value with inflation while your mortgage has not gone up. Okay, so through asset price appreciation, the average homeowner has made out very well because their home has gone up in value while their mortgage hasn't. However, I would add that is only a benefit to homeowners. Okay, and right now, for a lot of Americans, especially millennials, especially people who are in college or just getting out of college, the American dream of home ownership has never seemed more out of reach than it does right now. Because if you are up to your eyeballs in student loan debt, which you have taken out in order to earn a higher wage, which is now being devalued by inflation, and at the same time, the asset you want to buy, the home, has increased in value so much that you can no longer afford it. So again, the premise of this article is that the average American, the working class guy, has benefited from this inflation. That is not true. If you already own your home, you've benefited from inflation. But if you are young and just starting out and you want to one day own your home, you have been screwed. You have been royally screwed by this inflation. Now, the other thing I would add here is that if you don't own your home, then you are probably renting the place where you live. As these home values have skyrocketed, so have rents. Again, the poor have been hammered by this inflation, because not only are their wages going down in value, but now their rent has gone up. So no, they don't have more money to pay down debt. So again, the whole idea of this article is that inflation is helping the poor or helping the working class. That is totally, totally false. In so many ways, false. Moving on. And many of the people taking a bath when prices rise are higher net worth people who hold the vast majority of government bonds. Now, I had to read this sentence a couple of times when I first came through this article, because many of the people taking a bath when prices rise are higher net worth people who hold the vast majority of government bonds. Okay, so there's 2 halves of this sentence that I have to address, okay? The first half is that it's higher net worth individuals taking a bath by price hikes. And the second half is that they hold the vast majority of government bonds, all right? We'll address these one at a time. First of all, higher net worth individuals are not taking a bath on these price hikes. Higher net worth individuals, i.e. the rich, are making out like bandits right now. Because you know what the rich have? 2 things. The rich have a whole lot of 2 things. They have a whole lot of debt, and they have a whole lot of assets. Okay? Debt and assets. What the rich don't rely on very heavily is wages. So right away, the erosion of wages does not hit the rich like it hits the working class. All right? The rich benefit disproportionately from the watering down of debt, because the rich tend to take out debt to buy assets, i.e. businesses, properties, stocks, things like that. But the other thing is, when the rich disproportionately own assets, right? They own more stocks, they own more companies, they own more private businesses, they own more real estate, more land, all right? The rich have disproportionately benefited from this inflation. And I mean, it's not even close. And if you think I'm kidding, ask yourself, why is Bill Gates all of a sudden the largest owner of farmland in the world? Why did Bill Gates spend all of 2020 buying up farmland like there was no tomorrow? Why? Because he was preserving his wealth. He knew that land prices were going to go up. He knew that inflation was coming, and he wanted to secure as many assets that pay him a return as possible. All right. So the first half of this sentence, that the price hikes have hit higher net worth people, bogus, BS, not true. Now the second half of this, high net worth individuals who hold the vast majority of government bonds. I had to really look into this one because I wasn't really sure what to do with it. So I found this website on the balance, who holds U.S. government debt, okay? And this chart is showing who the main holders of government debt in the states are. And you can see in this chart right now, You got this teal section, and this is the truly hilarious thing here. Since 2020, look at how big the teal section has gotten. The single largest holder of U.S. government debt is the U.S. government. That's interesting. The Federal Reserve and government accounts holds 11.1 trillion of the roughly 29 trillion dollars in U.S. debt. How can the government owe money to itself? Well, that is the Federal Reserve printing money to monetize the U.S. Treasury's debt. If that seems off to you, it should. It's a recipe for financial disaster. But by far the largest holder of U.S. government debt is the U.S. government, not higher net worth individuals. The second largest holder of U.S. government debt, this orange section here, is foreign governments, other governments. There's another $7 trillion of debt. Now, the third highest holder, the $3.6 trillion, is mutual funds. Okay, so in here, in mutual funds, maybe we could say higher net worth individuals. But you know who else holds a ton of mutual funds? 401ks, pensions, IRAs, i.e. working class people. So no, I don't think that the U.S. government bonds not keeping up with inflation, I don't think that has hurt the rich. If anything, I think that has hurt the poor, because also in here, all the way at the top, I would add, is pension funds who hold $1.1 trillion of U.S. government debt. And who do pension funds belong to? Pensioners, people who want to retire someday. Pension funds sure as heck are not high net worth wealthy individuals. No, it's working class people. You know, also rounding out the list, you have state and local governments, you have depository institutions, insurance companies, and other, just $2 trillion. So, no, I don't think the inflationary effects whittling down the value of government bonds, I don't think that disproportionately hurts wealthy individuals. So again, CNN, I award you no points. The trouble is you're not going to feel the upside immediately. You think? There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just that it could be a couple of years, said Kent Smetters, professor of business and economics at the Wharton School of Business. How inflation favors debtors. The immediate benefits of inflation to everyday people are less tangible than the drawbacks. You feel the sting of your grocery bill and the gut punch of filling up your gas tank. Less palpable but still significant is the dwindling burden of your debt. If you're borrowing at a fixed year rate like a 30-year mortgage, then you're a winner as inflation goes up, said Smetters. We often think of a 30-year mortgage as an inflation hedge. I agree with that premise. We talked about that already. In other words, the cost of your mortgage is holding steady while the amount of money you have to pay for it is going up. Okay, that I don't necessarily agree with. We talked about it. Just because people's wages are going up doesn't mean those people have more money, because their living expenses are going up faster. So people have less money. It's not a perfectly synchronized event. Of course, wages don't go up immediately with inflation, but eventually they do, Smetters said. Well, eventually they go up, but in the meantime, people's lives are getting harder. And they're basically right now taking it as a granted that eventually wages are going to catch up with inflation. Well, we've been waiting around for that since 1971, and it has not happened. That was 50 years ago. Reading on, mortgages, the vast majority of which are fixed-rate 30-year loans, make up nearly $11 trillion worth of America's current record-high $15 trillion in debt. Meanwhile, wages are rising along with prices. No, they're not. They're not rising along with prices. Prices are rising faster, essentially shrinking the real value of that debt. The same inflation benefit applies to anyone paying off federal student loans, which also have a fixed interest rate. As your income increases, you're essentially getting a discount on what you have to repay. Okay, so on the student loan front, yes, as the student loan debt is fixed rate, assuming you're even paying your student loan debt, which apparently millions of people aren't even bothering to pay their student loan debt. But let's assume you're paying it. Yes, as inflation eats away the relative purchasing power of that debt, the debt is not getting any bigger, so you are coming out ahead. But you have to remember what student loan debt is. Student loan debt is basically a mortgage taken out against future wages, okay? It's money borrowed to increase your wages in the future. Well, right now, inflation is eroding the value of those future wages, at least the relative purchasing power of those future wages. So while inflation is eating away at the money you borrowed in order to earn those higher future wages, right now, the relative purchasing power of those future wages is going down, even though the nominal value of them is going up. I would also add that the relative value of a college degree has been plummeting at a ridiculous pace for the last 30 years or so in the United States, while the cost of that degree has gone through the roof. All right, so the idea that student loan debtors are somehow the beneficiary of inflation, I would not take that at face value. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but I don't think that's so cut and dry. Moving on, so far wage growth broadly hasn't kept up with price increases, you think? But analysts say that may change in the new year as shipping bottlenecks begin to ease. So what they're doing here is they're saying next year inflation will be less than wage increases because the supply chain problems are going to go away. I disagree, all right, because I don't think inflation is being caused by the supply chain problems. I think the supply chain problems are being caused by inflation, okay? And it's a chicken or the egg situation here. CNN is taking the position that as the bottlenecks work through, inflation is going to come down. I don't think that's the case. First of all, the bottlenecks, they should be easing already because all of the Christmas shipping is already done, all right? If it's not off the boat now, it ain't going to be here in time for Christmas. So this big rush of Christmas shipping is already done. So we should have seen this bottleneck at the ports go down, and we really haven't. I mean, we've seen some downtick in the amount of boats waiting off of Long Beach and LA to unload, but then I'm seeing stories that all they did was move the ships over the horizon to make it look like the count is going down. So I'm not so sure these shipping bottlenecks are just going to go away as soon as the Christmas season is behind us. And again, the reason we have the bottlenecks to begin with is because of the inflation, because we gave everybody trillions of dollars. They went out and spent it and they bought stuff. That's why we have the bottleneck. It wasn't the disease that gave us the bottlenecks. It wasn't the lockdowns that gave us the bottlenecks. The shipping bottlenecks didn't develop really until November, December of last year, almost 10 months into the pandemic. Right? The bottlenecks are the result of the money printing, not the virus. And I don't think that just goes away in January. Reading on, household incomes have been bolstered by government transfers such as stimulus payments and unemployment benefits. In the first 8 months of this year, personal incomes, which includes earned wages and government payments, were 15% ahead of where they were in 2019, says Daniel Alpert, managing partner of Westwood Capital. Okay, so household incomes in the first 8 months of the year were 15% ahead of 2019 because of government stimulus payments and unemployment benefits. Well, first of all, one of the reasons we have inflation right now is because of stimulus payments and unemployment benefits. When you print money and give it to people, you don't create value. All you do is you sap value from existing currency. Okay, so they're saying here, one of the reasons why inflation isn't going to hurt you so much is because we printed money and gave it to you. Well, that's what caused the inflation, you idiot. Also, you'll notice that they said in the first 8 months of the year, personal incomes were up. Why? Because in September, those expanded unemployment benefits went away. So in September, the data stopped saying what they wanted it to say, so they stopped counting after the 8th month of the year. You think we didn't notice that, CNN? Oh, yes, we did. Oh, yes, we did. That's hundreds of billions of dollars and was already on top of very high accumulated savings by households, which was a result of their having nothing to spend it on because everybody in 2020 was locked up. Okay, so he's saying that the savings has gone up. Now, that was true. It's no longer true, and I had to verify that. This is looking at the Federal Reserve's website, and here is personal savings in billions of dollars. And you can see savings did peak in April of 2020 at over $6 trillion in the United States. But what have those savings done ever since? They have come down, down, down. Now, we got some spikes with stimmy payments and tax refunds. But if you look where we're at now in personal savings, we're at about $1.32 trillion. We're actually below where we were at the start of the pandemic. So all that big boost in savings that everybody got from their stimmies and from being locked down and having nothing to spend their money on, that's gone. All right, the savings has all been spent. On what? Well, look at the ports. There you go. Now that money is gone, but the higher prices are still here. Inflation's losers. Not all debt shrinks with inflation, of course. Credit card interest rates, which largely aren't fixed, have shot up this year to an average of 17.13%, just under the all-time record high of 17.14%. That was reached in 2019, according to the Federal Reserve. And anyone living on a fixed income, such as retirees who aren't benefiting from wage increases that people in the labor force are seeing, are feeling extra pain as prices go up. So they're talking about credit card debt here right now. Keep in mind, As these savings have gone down, like we talked about a second ago, credit card debt is on the rise again. And that is not wealthy people taking out that credit card debt. That is the poor. That is the working class buying Christmas presents on the credit cards. So again, the inflation, it's not hurting the rich, it's hurting the poor. Another group getting hit are people with exposure to government bonds. Think households with more than $1 million who typically invest in both equities and debt. We talked about that before when we looked at who actually holds government bonds. I don't think this is accurate. While wealthy people may own more bonds than the average person does, I think as a percentage of their net worth, I think the wealthy tend to have more in assets like real estate and stocks. And I think a lot of people who hold bonds don't even realize that it's pensioners and it's 401ks and it's IRAs, i.e. the working class. Who are the ones that are going to be hurt by holding a lot of 10-year and 30-year bonds? That tends to be higher income households, says Smetters. So they're going to lose with higher inflation. Again, I disagree. I think the people who are holding the bonds is the government, foreign governments, pensions, IRAs, 401ks. I don't think it's going to hurt the rich. I really don't. That's because those bondholders who are essentially lending money to the government will be paid back in money that has less purchasing power, and that I agree with. We just don't know which end is up. There's a sticky psychological side to inflation, however, that makes it hard to clearly define winners and losers, because even though wages are rising and job growth is strong, Americans are bummed about the state of the economy. The Consumer Sentiment Index fell to a decade low in early November, according to data collected by the University of Michigan. The November fallout has inflation's name written all over it, said economists at Wells Fargo in a recent note. 1 in 4 people surveyed said inflation has worsened their living standards, and half said they expect inflation to wipe out whatever wage gains they were given over the past year. My sense is that people are exhausted by the level of chaos that we have, and inflation is a symptom, said Wendy Edelberg. No, inflation is not a symptom. Inflation is the cause of the chaos that we have. Okay? They keep saying that inflation is being caused by the pandemic or it's being caused by the bottlenecks. No, inflation is caused by the money printing, and the money printing is what's causing the bottlenecks and all the pain. So we have the economy surging, but how long is it going to surge for, and who is it surging for? And is it surging in a healthy way? Is it surging in a non-healthy way? Edelberg concluded, inflation just feels like a really tangible piece of evidence that we just don't know which end is up. So long story short, CNN is totally wrong. Inflation does not help everyday working Americans. It helps some everyday working Americans, as we established, like people who hold mortgages, right? But for people who are everyday working Americans who hope to one day own a home, no, inflation is killing them because it's whittling away their savings and it's eroding their wages. And also the premise in the CNN article that inflation hurts the wealthy somehow is on its head, totally 180 degrees the opposite of the truth, because the wealthy tend to own assets and earn their income through capital gains, not wages. And capital gains go up with inflation while wages go down, relatively speaking. Now we're seeing this trend emerge in the press where they deflect and cast blame when it comes to inflation. They're either telling you it's good for you, like they did in this article, or they're telling you, shut up and stop complaining, you can afford it, or they're saying it's the fault of those greedy corporations that are raising their prices so they can jack up their stock prices at your expense. The last thing they'll do is admit that printing trillions and trillions of dollars and then dumping that stuff into the economy is causing inflation and it's making people's lives more difficult now. They won't admit that the economic boom that we've had in the last year is nothing more than a sugar high. And now that that sugar is gone and out of our system, we're left feeling like crap. And now we have to deal with the fallout of it. They'll never admit to that. Why? Because in their next article, they're going to advocate for more money printing to pay for more unicorns and rainbows and who knows what else. They'll never admit that their own stupid ideas are what's causing this problem for everybody. So they will continue to deflect and confuse and cast blame anywhere but at themselves for what's going on. When you print money, you cause inflation. And inflation hurts the poor and helps the rich. Those are the facts you need to remember. Guys, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell. It really helps me out. It helps me to keep this channel growing. I'd be forever in your debt. And until next time, live small and dream big.